Can you hear me, Alison?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Sorry? Okay.
Yes, sorry,
Thanks.
Chen. I'd left the stage. Over to you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for the introduction, Alison. And currently, I'm in a special condition, so I cannot go there. It's a pity. But I can share my slide. And can you see my slide now in the full screen mode? I guess so.
Yes, we
okay.
can. Please go ahead.
Okay, cool. The topic today is the role of AI in transforming healthcare, domain adaptation. Yeah, so I may start from the story of two intelligent birds, actually. We may be very familiar with them in our daily life. The first one is parrot, and parrot can learn to repeat what the human being said very well. And there's some fixed scenarios. However, it does not understand what the words mean, but simply can just repeat the pronunciations. And it's highly likely that with some changing environment, the parrots won't be able to shout aloud the same words, or they may just speak some embarrassing word because some words don't fit into the context. And another bird, the crow, instead observed that the driving car can crack the cans and some little stones. Then the crow can learn how to crack the walnuts by putting them near the traffic light area. So they ask a favor from the car to help open the walnuts. And so let me summarize the following properties. The first point is the parrot has a very good memory, and it can memorize and repeats the words in a like fixed environment. However, the crow can learn the knowledge, and then it can adapt to the dynamic environment. Yeah, so let's look at another scenario in the task. So it's like a scene recognition task. That is to recognize the scene of the pictures. So from other words, what is the best single noun to describe the scenes in the following picture? So A and B. And let me move to another example. So C and D as well. Let's test on the following pictures. Yeah, so facing all these changing environments like A, B, C, and D, so human beings don't need to visit or live in the exact place in the following figure for a long time to recognize it is a kitchen. And we may adapt the knowledge from B to recognize A as well. For example, B is a kitchen in China, and I have lived for a long time using this kitchen. And I have never seen A before, but I can look at the pictures of A and recognize it is a kitchen. So basically, human beings can adapt the knowledge, learn from fixed environment to, and test this knowledge to different areas. Yeah, from the model training perspective, to be honest, I think I'm currently training some parrot models using some supervised tasks. So basically, we collect and annotate a data set, including pictures like B, for example, kitchens in China, and learn the mapping from image to a tag. It is okay, this picture and those pictures are kitchen. And then the model memorizes and repeats the patterns from images like B. So then it is very highly likely that the algorithm will fail to understand what is image A. And then another question is like, in this current supervised learning task, is our task too simple for the parrot model to train, or the tags, I mean, the annotations are not good teachers? And there are two following questions as well. From the model training perspective, what are the causes of the generalization issue? And the second is, how can we adapt the model to the new and unseen environment? So this talk is about how to answer these two questions. Yeah, so before we talk about the generalization and model adaptation techniques, I think Alex has already made a very good introduction about the dataset problem, dataset bias problem. So datasets used in this machine learning paradigm are often biased, and with the potential causes in the data collection and generalization, generation procedure. And for example, the imaging modalities are different, or the measurement or the treatment parameters are different, or even the reporting biases. So these biased data sets may lead to like frequent model overfitting to some collected laboratory data sets. So this means that it is lack of generalization to the real world data because we don't know what are the unseen data for our model to test on. And the thing is, some industry labs are collecting a lot of data sets from different environments so that they can build a very good and a large scale model to generalize. However, it is still a big effort. And this question or this like implementation of collecting a lot of data and annotate lots of data are not the question we would like to ask in academic field. And the left figure here, this one shows the 4 stages of the dataset grief, like from denial to understanding and to despair and finally to acceptance, the dataset bias. So the right-hand side figures show some of the examples of dataset bias. I guess Alex has already made a good introduction, so I don't need to illustrate in details. And more formally, the cause of real-world data biases is that the assumption is that the same aligning distribution between the train and test does not hold. So this further leads to poor cross-domain generalization performance. And then if we train a system based on this training data only, and the system will be very brutal in the dynamic engineering environment. As shown in the following 2 figures, data variations and the biases can be observed when using the same sensor, but different environments or different sensors to the same environment. And so to tackle this previous problem, so we need a theory to formulate this first. And then we develop methods based on the theory, and then we reevaluate whether the theory can prove our method's results or something like that. So this is like error bound. The error bound means the errors on the test data. And it is bounded by 2 terms. First is the training error. The second is the complexity of the data set. And this setup is an RID setup that basically means that the training distribution P is pretty equal to the test distribution Q. However, the real world is not like this. So the theory kind of models the transfer learning method to describe this dataset bias problem. It is the bottom figure. So the trained data set is described by the distribution P, while the test data set is described by the distribution Q. And so when P does not equal to Q, it comes to this domain adaptation problem or transfer learning problem. And this is the current paradigm of the deep learning sort of architecture. So we have a representative that is encoded to extract some features from the original data, whether it is the image or a text or a sentences. And then we have like a classifier based on those features H, and we can predict the annotations Y. And there is another theorem that is very important in this transfer learning paradigm. So it is like this equation. So under a test distribution Q, the error bound is bounded by 3 terms. The first term is the training error. The second term is the blue one. It's called the ideal joint error. It is always regarded as very small. And the third term is this one. This is the red one. The red one is called disparity. It basically describes how different of the features we can get from 2 data sets. Okay. And this red disparity differences, that is this right term, is indicated by the supreme over all the pairs of models in the hypothesis space. So let's just make it intuitive. Suppose that the blue and the red are two data sets or two domains. And we kind of can extract the features into this 2D dimension. And we plot it in the figure. The left-hand side means a low disparity scenario where we can find out two classifiers, H and H prime, to differentiate those two domains very clearly. So this disparity is very low. And as for this middle term, when the two data sets are kind of close or kind of lying in a very weird mode, it always happens in the real world data, especially in the unseen data, because we never know how the unseen data comes from. So this one means that we have a very high disparity scenario. And facing those two things, we kind of want to identify how can we reduce this test error in facing the unseen domain, unseen data. And because the three terms in the right-hand side is kind of fixed, because the first term is kind of fixed. It is about a training error, right? And this ideal stuff is assumed to be very small. And this is also small. So we can only focus on the right term, that is disparity between two domains. That is, how can we differentiate the data features from two domains? If a classifier or our best classifier cannot differentiate whether the data is from one domain or the other one, then we regard this it's like a good scenario. And it is like, I think one of the audience asked this question, how can we use a uniform treatment strategy or uniform modality imaging strategy to make sure that all the world are using the same strategy in the data collection procedure? And this question kind of can be answered by this equation. It's because, like, if we reduce this right term, it basically means that all the domain features are kind of identical or domain invariant in our case. So the same thing, we just want to use an illustrative example to say how can we use deep neural networks to represent this right term, because our goal is to reduce this right term. And this right term, if we regard this as two domains, and we want to train a binary classifier to differentiate whether the features from the two domains come from which one. So this, if that is the case, this right term can be reformulated as this equation here. And this is pretty simple. This is binary classification loss. So if we train a domain discriminator network, if its job is to differentiate how different those two domain features are, then we have a solution to reduce this right term. So those are the background theory. So we have a theory to say that we could potentially reduce those variation, reduce those dataset bias from the observation data analysis procedure. And the formulation is like this. And when P and Q share the sort of kind of the same label space, for example, P means we want to classify whether anatomy is a head or abdomen. But the Q here, the Q distribution kind of represents whether a model can differentiate a cat or dog, then P and Q does not share the same image label space. This is the conventional transfer learning. It is not the domain adaptation direction. So in domain adaptation, we focus on a simplified scenario where P and Q share the same image space. And during this domain adaptation scenario, we have different tasks according to different factors. Say, if we want to divide this domain adaptation method into two categories about the model type, we can divide all the domain adaptation method into shallow DA or deep DA method. It's basically different architectures or different methods we can use. And if we would like to divide the domain adaptation method in about the label availability, we can divide domain adaptation into supervised DA, semi-supervised DA, or unsupervised DA. It basically means how much annotation we can have from a new unseen environment. And if we talk about the modality difference DA, we have DA method for single modality or the DA method for the multimodality. And if we want to differentiate different DA methods based on number of source domains, say, and then we have like single source DA method or multi-source DA method. It basically how many source domain data and annotation we can have to use to train this model. And if we talk about this like adaptation step, it basically means that DA method can be divided into two. It's like single step or multi-step. Single step basically means you only have one chance to look at a target domain data, and then you do the adaptation. Or you can have a multi-step DA method. It's like you have your data and you can tune it for whatever iterations you want. So those are the DA method categories. And this talk is about unsupervised DA literature introductions. And the reason is like this. So unsupervised DA is the most practical one because we don't assume to use or have any annotations or labels from a target unseen domain. So from this scenario, it is the most practical. And suppose that if we develop a method for unsupervised DA, I think it is very easy to combine to other scenarios like supervised or semi-supervised DA. And the setup is like this. So we have the source domains, the DS, including the image X and the label Y, sampled from a distribution PS. And we have a target domain. Normally, we don't assume that we have any annotation about it. So we only have the data, XN, and we don't have any labels here. And our objective is to learn a model that can work well on the target, even if it is trained on a source domain. And for the UDA stuff, UDA methods, there are like 4 categories, including distribution feature matching method, image level alignment method, pseudo labeling method, or the recent contrastive learning method. Let me go into this in a brief way. Can I ask, sorry, can I ask how many time did I have left? Because I don't have this timing stuff.
You have about 10 minutes, Chen.
Okay, cool.
10 minutes to speak and then questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the first method is the very, very conventional one. It is proposed in 2016. It is called feature distribution divergence method. And this method architecture is showing this following figure. We have 3 colors, the green one, the sort of blue one, and the pink one. So we have an image X here, and we encode and extract the features from this X using this green encoder part. So we have a feature F, a little green bar here. And we feed these features into 2 classifiers. The first classifier is a content classifier. It is the content of this image. Say it is a kitchen or other room, or it is a cat or dog. Well, suppose that we have 2 domains, the source and target. So we can feed both domains data into the green one. And the aim of this domain classifier is to classify which feature comes from which domain. And once we train the classifier, encoder, and the domain classifier, we have a space. However, this space is kind of domain variant, and because this feature has not been adjusted. So the next step is to train this feature and encoder so that this feature can confuse this domain classifier. And in this way, we say that our feature here obtained a domain invariant. So this is a very, very conventional like idea. And this idea kind of drives a lot of different directions. And from my perspective, all of the following this direction works are kind of an extended version of this method. And then it comes to this joint label and feature distribution divergence measurement, because the last work only focused on the features, to be domain invariant, but how about its prediction labels? How can we like adjust the distribution of this label prediction space? Because we need this classifier to work very well on different domains. So we need this feature to be discriminative and also domain invariant. And this work kind of achieve this. So it just simply combine the label space GS here and the target domain label space GT here with these features. And then it still trains a domain classifier to differentiate whether a combined or integrated discriminative feature. So the goal then is to align the joint distribution between the feature and the prediction space. And this one is also an extended version of the previous one. And the only difference is it does not use a binary classifier to differentiate whether the feature is from which domain, but it asks the question, can we change the classifier complexity so that the classifier can not only classify whether the feature is from which domain, and meanwhile, the classifier aims to classify whether the feature is from which class. So it does two tasks, and it incorporates two tasks into this domain alignment procedure. And it is divided into like 2 or 3 steps, and the procedure is in follows. So suppose that we have different class data from using different colors, and the cells is bounded by this dashed ellipse, and the target one is bounded by this solid ellipse. And we represent this discrepancy region using the shadow. And the decision boundary, we use a gray solid line to differentiate. And the training flow is represented by this green arrow. So first, we need to know how how disparate those two domain features are. So we first move these two classifiers F1, F2, so that we can achieve a maximized discrepancy to describe what is the current situation. And then it learns the encoders so that all the space can be moved into a closed region together to reduce this discrepancy region. And these two steps work in alternative iterations. Yeah, first we train this G, F1 and F2 using the cells annotated samples. And then in step B, we maximize discrepancy on target samples. So we can feed these target samples here, and we also have the cells featured here. And the aim here is to maximize discrepancy based on those F1 and F2. The reason why we use maximize is because we want the classifiers to be represented the worst case of the feature alignment scenario, so that the encoder can align the worst case scenario, then the encoded feature are domain invariant. So that's the whole idea. And finally, we update G, so that this feature space is pretty good. And so we already talked about two discriminative feature distribution matching method. So what if the two data distribution are lying in different positions? So for example, one domain is MRI images, or the other domain is like the CT images. And although they maybe detect the same anatomy area, but those modality, those pixel differences are huge. So how about this scenario? It basically means that distribution of the data is very disparate. And how can we have a method to reduce those discrepancies? So as we seen, in this right equation, so this is a divergence measurement, and the P and the Q means two modality distributions. So then we have find out an arrow or a challenge here to describe when the two distributions are very disparate. It's like if the P and the Q are very disparate, there will always be some X that the QX will be 0. So if this is 0, the computation stability is not maintained. So in this work, they use this optimal transport laws that is insensitive to how disparate those two distributions are. And they then reduce their feature space distribution and align their domains. So the working mode is like this. So we have two images from two domains, source domain XS and the target domain XT. So we have the labels Y as here. And they feed forward to two encoders to obtain their features. And this CLS part is a classifier, content classifier to classify the content of the image, while still this domain is discriminator to discriminate whether the features are from the target or source. The only difference here is the discriminator loss. And this loss is derived from optimal transport loss. So it can enable matching disparate distribution divergence. Yeah, this is the contrastive learning stuff. It basically considers the source and target positive pairs and the negative pairs together. For example, positive pairs are the anchor plane from the source domain, and then it needs to collect a sample from the target domain that is real world airplane. So they need to maintain that all the feature space are aligned together in here. So this is like more like an instance level feature alignment rather than a dataset level feature alignment. Then another question comes, how can we find out a sample from the target domain that has the same category with the source domain data? That comes to a pseudo labeling method. So basically, we train a source model here, and then we use this model to predict on a target domain. So from the target prediction to the pseudo labels of the target image, we need to kind of like have design some pseudo label scoring functions. And there are normally 3 categories, including the confidence thresholding. That is, like we set a threshold that say at 0.7. So all the samples above this threshold will be regarded as that we have a pseudo label for it. And then we can also like say using some ranking laws based on how far the target domain's data are to the source domain anchors. And later on, we also have uncertainty measurement. That is basically to identify what is the uncertainty of each prediction. So it knows how confident we can trust the pseudo labeling scoring functions. So Alison, from my perspective, I think it is roughly the timing, right?
That's correct.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I may stop here. So those are all the feature distribution matching methods we could use in a domain adaptation method. And thanks for the listening.